So now, about a couple months ago, when I saw Jobin, Senior Jobin, go check out his channel, he did a review of this folder. DPX had sent him the prototype, right here, one of them, to evaluate, and then he was supposed to give them his feedback. And after seeing the video, and seeing that they had corrected some of the issues with the original version 1, I contacted DPX. I was like, hey, I'm kind of curious too. Can I check one out? And they had said there are no prototypes available. You just have to order them. Okay. So, I thought about it, and I watched Senior Jobin's breakdown of it, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to order some. Made an order of like 14, filled out the forms and everything. Seemed like a pretty good deal, and waited to hear from them. Now, as of today, the folder has already been released. And up until that point, I had received no word from them. And I had asked Jobin, hey, what happened once you gave them your feedback? And he had said the same thing, no word from them. And so that's where kind of now there's something, I would say, that kind of ruins the H.E.S.T for me. Now, originally, me and Mel, Mel being a girl, we were thinking, okay, what's a good compact folder that's tough? And of course, at some point, you find out about the H.E.S.T. But the first version was plagued by not only lock rock, but also of the fact that it could disengage with just pressure on the spine. And so that, of course, was like, oh, great. You see, the one time we find a folder that's cool, look, it has to have that problem. They fixed that on this new version. If you watch Jobin's discussion on it, and if you watch my video on frame locks, they had basically done what I had said they would do. At a production level, a cost-effective way to make a frame lock not fail. If you go watch that, they did that to the blade tang. You can see, to kind of not have to do too much work, they you can see here they kind of just milled down. You can see there's kind of like 3 steps. They kind of milled down a middle portion right there. Okay, this contact portion used to be longer, used to extend to here, and it ran kind of flush, and the lock would slide. And what they did is they opted to go this route, and they also did, saying that this was very, very far inset, like behind, if you can see where the blade tang would meet, now it's this corner right here. Before it used to be very far back, and it just didn't work, so they widened this area. But when you do a frame lock that way, I had said that there's 2 flaws that can happen. One is you can get that rattle to develop, and because it wears out that small contact portion of the lock bar, and that's what has happened to this folder. And so on the new one, Senior Jobin was saying that it quickly developed that rattling, which it doesn't right now, and I'll explain why. And but it wouldn't disengage when spine whacking. So, is that in the end fine? Yeah, I would say it's fine. It's fine. I mean, that's what you get. Now, of course, the trade-off you always hear about Striders then is, okay, it just keeps wearing and wearing and wearing. Now, does that happen to this one? Thankfully, not so much, because if you can see, the lock bar is extremely thick. It has a very wide lock bar. It's almost probably 4 millimeters in width. So there's a very large contact portion. So basically meaning a large surface here on top of this titanium is meeting with the lock bevel, and that will wear very, very, I would say, that'll last. Once you've bent it in, which, if you can tell now, I've had to do. To remove that rattle, because before the lock bar spring wasn't that pushed in this far. It was like this, it would rattle. So I took it apart, bent it very, very far inward, and you can see now how far it goes in. Of course, that now causes a couple issues, and we'll discuss that. Now the next thing was, okay, so here you got this DPX company. Obviously I've read Mr. Pelton's book. I mean, here's this guy who's ran with the bulls, supposed to be, he's been everywhere, right, into the world's most dangerous places, right? And here he is on YouTube, and he's afraid of YouTubers saying bad things about his product, to the point where he won't even provide feedback. I never got my order. I didn't say a single thing to them. All I did was ask for a prototype. They checked out my YouTube channel and they backed out. Now, in all fairness, okay, they're running a business, and I can understand if they don't want to risk, having the product go into someone's hands who's going to negatively review it. But at the same time, I made it order. I wasn't going to like full on say it's a piece of crap. The main thing to realize for me and for you guys too is that the limitations of this folder aren't exactly the fault of Mr. Pelton and his company DPX. Since, you know, it's different, because when you have a knife by a company like Strider or Chris Reeve or something, you know, these are custom knives, and these are knives made to the specifications of their creators. They are able to choose their steels, their heat treatment, you know, everything is in-house. They pick and choose. But when you have it where DPX outsources and gets a company like Lion Steel in Italy to manufacture it, you know, there are limits set by that manufacturer that perhaps Mr. Pelton couldn't do anything about. You know, like for example, I've heard from Combat Veg Mr. Walker that, you know, this pocket clip is a Fox, a military pocket clip. This isn't up to him. So, you know, okay. So in the same sense, you have to realize the things I'm about to pinpoint and say are negatives about this knife may not be Mr. Pelton's fault. But I will say this, that, you know, right now, Mr. Walker, he doesn't even return my phone calls. And here's the DPX. You know, I actually had to trade with Jobin to get this so that I could review it, because I was kind of, you know, hesitant to go and pick up a large order, not knowing what I was getting into. And, you know, coming from a company that, you know, this is themed as a knife that will survive a hostile environment, that you would take with you if you had to survive, you know, literally with just this knife, you know, I would expect a little bit more from the actual manufacturer. And they're probably not going to like me after this, but, you know, hey. There are knife makers that I do business with that are smaller companies, smaller, you know, operations. They aren't afraid of, you know, putting it out there. I mean, they made this knife, they made this product, and they are going to have it out there, and whatever happens, you know, they have to have a confidence and knowledge in their product. And at the same time, they can be willing to adapt and take people's feedback. I mean, ultimately, this is just my opinion. And it makes me feel that they knew that their product was flawed, and therefore they knew that you know, they knew something. Because I mean, if they didn't, say they had full confidence in what they did and the design, then they would have just went forward and let me try it. For me, I do these tests so I know, from my own personal knowledge, what I can expect out of you know, this equipment and gear and these tools. Now, the videos though, I do for you guys. I video retape them and I record them for YouTube so that I can share that information that I picked up and spread it. Now, here we have the H.E.S.T folder, and I'll go briefly over it. It's a 5mm blade, so at this size, which is a 3-inch length, you're looking at basically the thickness of an SMF. You can see here, it's got coated screws on this side, but this side, these females are not, I guess the term now is Chicago, but they're not open, so you can't like necessarily, if rust forms inside of them, you're in trouble. You can see here, this glass break that helps clip that pocket clip in place. They removed the liner. Now it's just G10, which is fine. They've widened this profile. You go watch Jobin's video; it's very detailed about it. I'm gonna go over the knife, starting in one side and work my way around. Okay. Now first, let's talk about, okay, how about the screws? The screws are good quality. They seem to be hardened to a certain point. And you can see here the, you know, they opted not to screw directly into titanium, and that might be a Lion Steel construction idea, because here it is on the BBR1, same thing, females, the exact same kind. But the screws are the kind of screws that, even though they're small, are good quality, because they're the ones with the raised kind of heads rather than the dome shape. You can see, so they have a tendency to not strip as easily. Okay. Now, probably one of the reasons why they didn't want to screw directly into titanium is because, you know, whether or not this is scientific, this is what I've experienced. Lion Steel titanium is soft. I mean, you can see here the damage that's on this scale that I showed in my previous test, and the purpose of that was, I'm trying to show you that the titanium on these Lion Steels is soft, like softer than other knives, like by far softer than the Strider knife, softer than even Chris Reeve's titanium. It's not very durable. Like you drop it and it dents very easily and gets damaged. You can see over here, and that will lead kind of on to why the lock bar wears out so fast, which is why I was doing that. As for this pocket clip, Makes sense. I mean, here you are, you're trying to minimize parts and stuff, because this is supposed to be some survival tool. So that makes sense. And rather than tapping directly into the TI, which is soft, and risking perhaps stripping, they chose to do it and tap it into the aluminum backspacer right here. Okay, so that makes sense. Now, why a lot of people, like Jobin was saying, this is uncomfortable, is because of this bulk right here. And this position of the pot clip kind of is kind of by default. He couldn't do better because of the design. Because if you see most knives, if you understand, like towards this area, usually you don't want a bulk. Like if you had put this pot clip further down, it'd be even more digging into your fingers. See, because the thing is, you have to realize, and I'll keep covering this, is this design was originally a fixed blade design, which works great. When you turn it into a folder, now you have to add a pocket clip, you have to modify things and add things, at which point then certain things become not, how you say, matching to this shape. Because this shape works better as a fixed blade. And one of those things is that pocket clip. Like I said, I mean, he had to put it somewhere. If you put it further down here, it would be digging into your fingers. You may not even be able to get your fingers around. It'd be very uncomfortable. Because usually most knives, that they have a slim down profile towards that area. Like you can see, like there's a kind of a gap. You see, like a gap right here. Let me see if I can show this concept. You see, most knives, they have the pocket clip lower, but the knife doesn't have a large bulk necessarily right here. You can see most knives have a cutout so that your fingers can get around. There's not a large mass right here to grip around. Here you have this knife, and you have this large, wide portion. You know what I mean? You couldn't have put it lower, and so you put it higher, and you end up with this kind of weird digging into your palm kind of feeling. But I mean, hey, you know what? You could tough that out. That's not the end of the world in terms of whether the knife is worth it or not. But we'll keep going further, okay? Now, it is a completely low ride knife, so I mean, basically, it sits all the way in your pocket. Now, since this is stonewash, it slides easily in and out of your pocket. Does it fall out? We didn't have that problem. Mel, girl pockets are short, even with her moving around. We tested running up and down hills when we were hiking, no problem. And same thing for me. You pull it out quickly and easily, it has that to grip. You pull it out, it does wave. Okay, so that's not so bad. But you can kind of tell, I mean, it was kind of like, again, trying to find that balance. Most tactical folders will have a portion of the bottom of the handle sticking out so you can grip. This knife, if you did that, it would slide off too easy, especially with this pocket clip design. So he tried to do his best to situate where it sits deep at the same time as quickly to extract. But generally speaking, you think a hostile environment, something you want to survive with, you're not always thinking just tactical use. You want that knife to stay in your pocket secure. Like a Strider is secure very well into the pocket, especially when they have the bead blast finish. These wire clip ones, not as good. This Terzula one gets stuck. It has like 2 spots. Chris Reeve knife will be the same way. Okay, Jobin was complaining about this, the ergonomics. It's too thick. This is something you will notice when you use the knife a lot, is that this area is too thin and this area is too thick. So it's kind of like mismatched. First, I will say I think it's a little better for people with bigger hands, and I'll get into that. But let's say, for example, whether you have big hands or small hands, you're going to notice this. Either this area is going to be easy to grip, or this area will be hard to grip, or vice versa, because the shape, again, is kind of off. Here you have this wide portion here near your pinky, which is usually, again, not the case, not like right here. Usually it would cut out into it. And you have this solid width with no bevels. I mean, if you took another knife, for example, like this, there's bevels and stuff, where you can grip it, and even this is not as thick. I mean, it's kind of an odd place to have bulk, right there where your lower fingers are, and it creates like a hot spot down there. And then here you have this extreme cutout now that they added, which I'll get to, is definitely good for when you have gloves, you need to unlock it, your fingers are wet. But, hey, when your fingers are wet and you have a, for example, SNG or something, and you need to unlock it, you can also just do that, and they could have opted to mill it out like this. And that would have worked fine. I mean, at the same time, they could have, same thing, they could have done that, does this cause the knife to disengage and catch, does the lock bar catch in your finger when you're using it? Because in the end you have to push it so far and the lock bar is so wide, it does move out, but it still won't disengage because you're holding it. But I think this little cutout was unnecessary. It was a kind of odd way to do it. And these edges right here are kind of pointy to the point where, if you can see, there's that little red kind of bump right there. That is from gripping it and using it hard, and it pops some blood vessels. Kind of goofy. Kind of goofy. Because it does come to a point, if you can see. Basically, this whole area is a point now. You know, and it thins it down so much, it is a little odd. Like, you got this thin portion here. Basically, the knife is only comfortable to hold like this. When you're using it, you have to kind of put your thumb on the top ramp. If you don't, it gets kind of uncomfortable. It's just not intuitive. Like Senior Joe was saying, that if they had ovaled it, basically contoured all this, it would be better. And that is one of the ways you can fix this knife. Call Tough Thumbs up. Say, hey, Tough Thumbs, I really like the H.E.S.T. You know, Dave is telling me it sucks. You know, can I get this fixed? You know, yeah, get this fixed. Contour this area. Conceal carry, basically. You know, make it round, give it some bevels, and you'll be much better. You'll even it out. Okay. Now, let's see. Now the lock, Jobin was saying it wore out very quickly, and that's why I did that test showing how the TI got dented so easily. Because this line steel TI is so soft. And I know that from even using my BBR1 when I told you the tolerances were so tight that it was hard to pull it apart. If you watch Jobin's video, he had a hard time separating the entire knife. You know, I had to put something in there to pry, and it dented the titanium. In fact, you can see here actually the little dent where my tool went. You see the little reflection? That is because I had to, you know, I took a screwdriver and, you know, the round portion dented the TI. And same thing with this knife. It's hard to take apart because the tolerances, everything's kind of press fit, and this TI is so soft that that material up there on the lock bar wore out so fast that's why initially it wore out so fast, because this TI is soft. Line steel TI is soft. You know, does that make any sense? It doesn't matter. That's just what it is. Compared to other brands, it's definitely some of the softest stuff. Because I've dropped my striders and I've literally thrown my Trizula onto the concrete by accident and you end up with a scuff. This one you end up with a dent. Same thing with my Zan. So I don't know what that's about, but that's just something to consider. Now, is this lockup going to fail? I think it's going to be fine. If someone says, oh, well, you know, this is just this one. But this is a prototype they sent to another YouTuber to review, and knowing that this could possibly give them bad publicity for their next batch, this one should not have had any flaws. I mean, if they did, then that was dumb of them. So, in all honesty, I don't think this is a bad representation of what some of the best H.E.S.T. 2s you could get out there. So, you know, does this have like a fail-safe, you know, liner lock system where it's curved over? I don't think so. Okay, it's just that small contact portion pushing at it that way. Now, you look at the lock bar stabilizer. Okay, first of all, it does loosen again, and there's a Teflon washer in there. Now, this is one of the easiest knives to operate, that little lock bar stabilizer. Whether left or right hand, it's easy to, you know, on, off. You see, it's very easy to use. On, off. It's one of the more, because of the compact shape, it's very easy to turn on and off. But you can see here, though the lock bar stabilizer does contact the lock bar, and this roto block, what they call it, once you have to bend it inward, you can see what happens. It no longer contacts the lock bar unless you activate it. Which at that point, you see that little portion that's kind of sticking out, that's kind of like a T-shape, a little protrusion right there. That then will lock it in place and stabilize the bar from moving inward, which it does. It has a little bit of movement, but not bad. Okay. So, could that have been fixed? If they move this down further, it would contact the area that doesn't bend over as much, or perhaps thicken and bulken that entire piece. But this safety choil only works if your hand is all the way up in the choil of the knife, the actual contour of the knife. You can see here, it does stop, thankfully, but just ever so slightly, meaning if you didn't have big hands like Mel, she pulls it out, she waves it, and it doesn't wave properly. You can see here, it starts to not be effective. Mel's hand is down here, and it basically is useless. And because you can see they cut out a portion of it, you can't, if you don't open it, which I'll get into, you can't just, you see, you can't just open it. Now, is that something that's important? you know, you would be surprised when you have that feature in a knife, how much you miss it. You know, how intuitive that is to be able to just do that. Like, it's something that, it's intuitive, and it's a simple thing that they could have done for that knife. You know, if you have this, you know, you see, no big deal. Same thing with the S&G, you know, you just do this, and if you didn't open all the way, you just pop it open. It definitely helps to not have to go in there and do this, which sometimes can be dangerous anyway. You can accidentally throw your knife, or you could, you know, it could swing back the other way and nick a finger if you're not paying attention. It's just a level of intuitiveness that would have been nice for them to have added and considered. Plus, if they filled out that choil, then it would be safer on your finger. But like I said, this is supposed to be a tactical folder where you might consider waving it, and that's the whole purpose, to be very forgiving, that if your finger's not in the right position, it'll still protect you, you know? And that's kind of something it's definitely missing. I mean, if you look at this S&G here, you know, if your fingers... The S&G is better, because, I mean, look, you wave it and you pull it out, right? Okay, or you just pull it out and you flick it. It's just intuitive by the shape. Your hand has nowhere else to go. Your finger goes there and you grab that triangle section right there. And your finger is safe. You know, further down, you know, or higher up, it's safe. And that's intuitive. That is like for, you know, for when you're not paying attention, you appreciate that being there. So this choil could have easily been fixed. You can see here that the reason why is because it stops in the stop pin. If they wanted to, though, they could have just shifted that stop pin further up, and it, just like an R.J. Martin knife, it wouldn't have mattered. Now, you can see here this blade tang is decent. Now, a tactical thing that probably Mr. Pelton did know, which is you can see here where that blade tang is exposed, if you were to get dirt in it. And most of my testing of frame locks, when they jam or they fail, is because of the dirt getting stuck on the blade tang where the stop pin meets. And so this one exposed itself to where you can wipe it, just like my Terzula, which is a really nice feature, you know. Okay, so in that sense, that one kind of beats out even like a little Sebenza, you know. That's smart. You know, S&G though, because here's a stop pin, you know, no big deal. So it's a feature that you find on more expensive tactical folders. It's a logical one, and that was a good job. Now, the pivot, okay? The pivot you saw in the video without Loctite loosens through use. So now here you have this hostile environment survival tool. They should have opted for a pivot similar to the paramilitary or Sebenza, some kind of bushing system where you didn't need Loctite. Because this really does. So basically, when you have this tool, you need the tool to tighten the pivot constantly with. You need that little skull pry bar they add. Now you can see, because again, closed female, that's not exactly the best for maintenance and you know, outdoor use. But again, that may not be his fault. The washers are some of the thinnest Teflon washers you will ever find. Now, I was saying about the BBR1 how like the washers are exposed, like how you can see them sticking out beyond the blade tang. And those sharp edges of the blade tang could kind of damage the Teflon washers. You could go in there and sand down those corners of that blade tang, which I've done. But nevertheless, you can see these washers, they're very thin. Thinner than the Hinder, especially thinner than the BBR1, which is like almost twice the thickness of the washers of a H.E.S.T. And they're not phosphor bronze. What you end up with, first of all, some people have said the action isn't smooth. Yeah, I would say that I have gone through great lengths to put, I put machine oil because that's the smoothest. I put even graphite mixed in with it, and it's just not smooth. It just isn't smooth, and unless you loosen it a lot and it's uncentered. And then, you know, like I said, you're going to need that pivot to be somewhat tight. It's just not smooth, and it's never going to break in because of those Teflon washers. If they were phosphor bronze, they would start grinding into the blade, smoothing everything out, and you might have some progress. But the way this is made, you're stuck like this. And, you know, you're always stuck like this. So it's not the best. I think that's definitely a flaw. Especially, I think, if you start to pry really with it, I think those Teflon washers would give out and get damaged or tear. Now, as for the blade is great. This is a great blade shape, like Jobin was saying, and it is, because a small blade like this, you know, you want a nice, you don't have much of a length to work with, so you want lots of belly, so you have more cutting edge, and you can cut, you know, at different angles. You know, you can cut like this with this area, and pushing like this. You know, you can do a lot with this blade shape, and this blade shape is great. Basically, it's a spiracle leaf blade shape. If you see here, like on the Sage 2, get it. Basically, he just straightened off the tip. And if you wanted to, you could just, say for example you had to reprofile, all you gotta do is just scrape down this flat surface at the top, and it would come down and become a leaf shape blade little by little, and you would keep creating a new tip. That'd be great. So in that sense, that is functional. So that's very easy to reprofile, and it's a very good blade shape that does work very well. This steel here though is D2, and it's hard. I mean, it's a high Rockwell hardness for sure, because it's not easy to sharpen. To the point of saying this, let's say you had to have a survival knife, okay, and you say, well, what steel would you want? Well, I mean, you ask a bunch of like a Jim at 3 Sister Forge forwarded me an email showing a contest with hunters and stuff, and they chose CPM 154 CM and 1095 because it was, it was more functional outdoors. It was easier to sharpen. Jay Davis, he just did a video showing how easy it was to take 8CR 13 MOV and just touch it up with barely 10 strokes on a fine rod and give it back to razor edge. That's what you kind of want when you're looking in a survival situation. When I have to sharpen this, I have to practically use a diamond, and it takes forever. If I had reprofile, I mean, like I went and reprofiled my BBR1. You go watch that. I turned it into two edge angles. You can see here's more of a shallow angle, and here's more of a working angle. You can see, and this required a fine diamond rod, and it required lots of work to do it. Now, if you don't have that with you, then this becomes a headache. This is like, now this might be, again, not the fault of DPX gear, because this is line steel. But I mean, line steel, if this is going to be a knife you're going to take with you to survive, it would be better if it was a softer Rockwell to be easier to sharpen. And so that, for me, it's horrible. It's horrible to work with. I don't like it. Like, I wouldn't want to be stuck with it. That's the next thing. Also, with the higher Rockwells, of course, you always have the chance of chipping, and you don't want that kind of, you don't want to have to reprofile a knife that you're trying to survive with. You need diamond rods to do it. When I first got the knife, this edge was kind of weak, and Jobin had said that, and you touch it up, and now the edge is much more strong, less microchipping, so there possibly was some heat damage from laser cutting. Let's see. When you look at, like, okay, you want edge retention. That's like for EDC, box cutting for work, for normal modern use. When you look into survival situations, though, you don't need it to hold a razor edge. You don't need that kind of edge out in the wild, if you were in the wild, or in any kind of survival situation, really. Kingdom Army, for example, was telling me his Rockwell is purposely on his S30 much lower than usual. Jen Zanzo, he uses H.E.S.T 34 because it is easier to sharpen. He feels that his customers are going to appreciate that. And I like CPM 154 CM also because of that. I mean, I don't need to pack much. Just a fine diamond, a fine ceramic gets everything done. Now, also to consider the stainless aspect. D2 is not that stainless. It's not bad, but I mean, you end up with just a little bit more toughness. Could they have just gone with S30V or S35 and just had a little bit of a lower HRC? They could have, but again, that isn't Mr. Pelton's perhaps options in terms of when they manufacture it. Can you shake this knife open? Not really. Is it a flick knife? Not so much. If you look at now the price of the H.E.S.T, which I know the dealer prices, and I'm just going to say this. Let's ignore price. Let's just look at features, okay? I mean, let's say, for example, you had $200 and or more. Well, you know what? You could save your $200 and get a knife that would be worth getting. So the question is, is the H.E.S.T worth it, regardless of what it costs? Because there's many other options still you could get. Again, in terms of value, you get this little cool tool right here that you can use to pry things with. And this is very thick stock also. This is actually pretty cool. I would say this is probably my favorite part of the kit, funny enough. I like this the most. For me, I might buy this just to sell it and then keep this, because this is pretty cool. I mean, but you have to look at that. You can get pry bars, usually they cost like $30 or something, even when they're made by Boker. So I mean, this is actually a little bit stronger, and it has a cute, look, it's kind of a universal look. Anyone can put it on, they don't know what it is. For the price, okay, you're getting an SMF thickness with a SNG features, except the washers kind of suck, the finger trail kind of sucks, and the pot clip's not like the same thing as a Strider. Okay, but you're getting it for an affordable price. The flaws, the ergos, the pot clip position perhaps, but it's justified, and because of the shape and design, it's a little bit uncomfortable. And overall, I would say it's a little bit more hassle. It's not as intuitive as it could be. And the lock bar stabler has to be activated to work, so you always have to do that. The knife choil can't assist in opening. The steel is not as it's not as, the steel is not that functional to use in my opinion in the survival situation. And then at the same time, the grips, it's not as forgiving. You have to grip it properly. And these things, all things you have to consciously do. These are things you could practice to where they're subconscious, but I'm saying in terms of overall ease of use and intuitiveness, you're just not getting the intuitiveness you can get with other designs. This here is just in this video because it's badass, and this is also for someone, a couple guys, you know who you are, and I put in this camera video so you can see it. Whoa, right? I know, this thing is badass. Anyway, the point is, this is pretty sharp right here. Now the point is, there's other options. You're looking at why you would get a H.E.S.T is because you want something compact that you feel that you could be really strong and durable and you could survive with. You could do extreme things with. But what this knife is, then you'd be better off getting a Browse Blades Silent Soldier. Something like a small fixed blade, like an Izula or something, anything along those lines, a compact, small fixed blade, because you're going to have the thick blade stock, without having for it to thin down to fit inside some handles. And you're going to have ergonomics that can, not have to take in consideration a lock bar and a pop clip, just basic, the function of a handle, a comfortable handle. And at the same time, you're going to have less maintenance. No worries about having to pack a tool to fix the pivot and tighten it, or screws rusting, or parts, small parts breaking, or even Teflon washers giving out. In that sense, it's much more logical to find yourself a fixed blade. May have a steel that's easy to sharpen that you could use to survive. As the overall picture of what's out there, okay? For the price, yeah, it's something that other knives don't offer, but you can get a small fixed blade for much cheaper, and honestly, you can put that in your pocket too, wear it around your neck. So for me, I'd go for a small fixed blade. And the best I can say for this, it's my job and even my privilege to protect Mel. Then would I trust my life or her life and want to have this H.E.S.T with me? No. They're not very interested, it seems to me, in how to improve it. So in that sense, this isn't the real deal for me. I don't think so at all.